Welcome to my channel, Life After Losing My Child. On this channel, I like to talk about my own personal experiences after losing my daughter. The purpose of this channel is to have a place for families that have suffered the loss of a child, where they could come and find support and inspiration as we all move down our own individual paths towards healing. If this sounds good to you, then hit the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the bell to stay tuned to my upcoming videos. So I'm actually doing a series of the 5 stages of grief, and in this series today we're going to be talking about depression. I have Kelly Mariano with me, who's going to be interviewing me with various questions that I have no idea what he's going to ask, so I have my tissue with me ready to cry just in case, but I hope you enjoy what we talk about today. All right.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Lydia. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. So far.
No, yeah. No need to be afraid.
Good.
So, as you stated, we're going to talk about depression. And in the previous video, we talked about some of the work of Counselor Carl. And we've done other research as well, watched other videos, and then other things that you've researched, certainly. But on this particular video, on a particular video from Counselor Carl.
Did you want me to do the 5 stages first?
Sure. Please.
Okay, so, because usually we do the 5 stages. So, the 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So, we're almost actually done our series here.
We sure are. We're getting
almost.
close.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that he stated regarding depression was, depression is the stage in which we finally feel the full impact of the loss with all its implications. Do you agree with that statement?
Maybe. I don't know, because I feel like you're going through a depression throughout the whole thing. So I'm not sure. I don't know.
That's why I kind of wondered whether or not that's something that, someone that's going through that would agree with that statement or not. Mm-hmm. So that's why I kind of posed it, because it just seemed like it could be a controversial statement of sorts. Yeah. I'm sure he wasn't intending for that, because, we do look at the stages as being, we know they're not completely linear, but we kind of look at them, even because we call them the 5 stages, so people tend to look at it that way.
Right. But I feel like the depression overall kind of starts the moment you lose your child. It's like from the beginning. So I had a hard time with it too, with just like a stage of depression. But because I was like, it's throughout the whole
it almost seems like
time. Like,
depression envelops everything.
Right. Yeah. But maybe there must be a stage, I guess, somewhere in there, because once you move from depression into acceptance, then maybe you're not as depressed, or like depression isn't consuming your whole life then. So maybe it is like, I don't want to say a stage, but I guess that you're not as focused on the depression as you are on the healing. You know what I mean? So maybe it is.
I think that's kind of what we dealt with in the previous video, is the whole concept of stage, or like even the whole thing about grief as a whole, that there's an end. Right. You know what I mean? So when we think of stages, we definitely think of, okay, there's an end to it. Like when we're growing up, there's stages of our childhood, stages of adolescence, and then we cross into adulthood. So at some point, that stage ends. The previous stage ends. Whereas with grief, it's not really about ending. It's really just kind of about recognizing that there are different phases. Maybe phases would be, although that's how we tend to think of that as.
Or emotions that are more intense, I would think, at certain times throughout the grief journey. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that concept of stages just makes us think.
Yeah.
There's a beginning and an end. But I guess if you're not in it, I mean, we've all experienced some level of grief on some from something in our lives, some level of loss. But I think if it's not that close, we probably can think of it as, oh yeah, like I don't really think of grieving like grandparents or something that I wasn't necessarily that close to. I don't really think of that, quote unquote, like that process. But I think when the grief is closer or the impact is closer, I think you can feel those stages more, they're more impactful, I think, in your life, maybe. I mean, at least that's the way it has struck me. But I've never suffered the loss of a child, so I definitely can't relate directly to that. I've lost a parent, but of course, in that sense, we talked about that before too, that's kind of what we consider to be the norm. Right. Is we expect our parents to pass before us, stuff like that. So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting statement that he made. So how would you specifically define depression?
I have no idea. I mean, depression just in general, or depression?
Well, the stage.
I mean, because I don't think it's a stage. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't feel like it is a stage. I feel like it's an interwoven thing that's throughout the whole grieving process, I guess, until you get to acceptance. But see, I don't even understand that, because even if you're at a point of acceptance, there's still a portion, I would think, that you would then feel depressed at some points. Even if you're accepting it, there's still going to be times, holidays, birthdays, different days, just any random day, that you might fall back into that. But maybe that's not accurate on my not accurate in my description, because I haven't gotten to acceptance yet, so I don't even know what that looks like. So I guess there, to me, was the definition that it's interwoven throughout grief.
Okay. But what would you say depression is? If someone's just unfamiliar with the concept of depression, what would you say that is? Well,
according to regular psychologists and stuff, they say it's a lack of interest in things that you normally do. Well, these are symptoms of it, but lack of interest. It affects your appetite and your sleep. Okay. So you either overeat or don't eat enough. You're either sleeping all the time or you lack sleep. It affects those areas. So it's a feeling of being down, and but then there's various levels. So you could be depressed, but then you could be clinically depressed, and then you could have the depression with grief. So it's all different, levels.
Would you be able to
separate?
Yeah, separate those three levels.
I mean,
is there a way to articulate that?
I think with the depression after you lose a child, it's just I don't know. I don't feel just thinking about it. It could be very. I mean, you could have a hard time just, brushing your teeth or anything. Eating, everything. It affects it all. It affects your ability to interact with others. You do lack motivation to do things that used to be fun or that you enjoyed. It can affect your eating. It can affect, all those areas that I guess regular depression affects. But it's it's a lot worse. And I think the duration is longer. You know what I mean? But depending on the person. That goes back to that, depending on the person. So.
Yeah. I guess I was going to say, how would someone recognize the difference between depression and, I mean, obviously if you have a loss, maybe people will recognize that, but what's the difference between that and being just kind of in just down about something, or are they the same? Is that the same kind of a thing? A feeling of just being down as well? No?
It's like beyond being down. I
okay.
mean, you're in a pit of like...
Yeah, that's what I'm just trying to extract.
Yeah, I'm just trying to like figure out, because it's so hard to... I don't know. I mean, you're in a pit of like... I think the isolation is a huge part of the depression, because you can't explain to people that haven't lost a child how it feels. They can't understand you. So your depression, a lot of it is being isolated. So because of the circumstance, you're automatically put in this isolation, and then your child, who you love with all your heart, is gone. And then you may be dealing with marital issues because your child is gone. But then you still have to function for the children you have left, which sometimes makes you even more depressed, because you have to like muster up any kind of energy to perform and still be a mom, because they deserve that too. It's so much to it, like, and because like we were talking about with the last stage, which was bargaining, which I'm going to touch on just for a second, but the bargaining with the hopefully trying to undo what has been done, and living in the what ifs, the woulda, shoulda, coulda, that then makes you fall into this depression even further. So it's like trying to crawl out of this pit and really having no energy, a lack of tools to get out of it, and you know, just being by yourself, because nobody can pull you out of that. I mean, people can say certain things to try to assist. I guess you could go to a therapist that will try to help you change your perspective, or maybe let you know that it's okay to feel that way, but work with you through it. But the end of it all, you have to be the one to decide that what the therapist saying is valid or has some validity, or use the tools or coping skills. You still have to decide that you want to come out of that. You know what I mean? So
okay,
yeah.
So I've heard you use the term regarding depression, I believe, as being agony. Is that correct, or were you talking about just the whole grieving process?
I think the whole process, but yeah, the whole process, because it's agony runs throughout the denial of like, I need to place my kid here somewhere, because I can't deal with coming to the reality that they're not here. So I have to put myself in denial, because it'll be too much agony for me to face that. You're in agony with the anger. You know what I mean? Because you can't, you're angry that they're gone and there's nothing you can do about it. You're in agony with the bargaining. What if I coulda, shoulda, whatever. You're in agony with the depression because you're isolated. No one understands, and you're just hurting. It's like you're bleeding out. So you're constantly, to me, it's an overall, overarching feeling, you know, so.
Okay. Now, I imagine, like we talked about in the previous video, that we talked about kind of unresolved grief. Obviously, depression is another channel that to lead towards that. Could that also lead to, and I think he may mention this, but I just want to ask a question for the sake of the video. Could that that level of depression lead to a clinical depression?
Yeah, I think it is basically like you're clinically depressed. I also think that level of depression possibly could lead to suicide.
Oh, well, definitely. We've talked about that. Yeah. Talk about that a little bit. Like, has that been a challenge for you? Like, have you had suicidal thoughts, or maybe dealt with people who've gone through?
Okay, now we're getting honest, right? Okay, so I mean, definitely. I hate to put it out there because, you know, just with even my surviving daughter possibly saying this. But her and I have talked, and she's even had those thoughts. So
that's what I was going. When you mentioned Zanai, when you mentioned
Zanai, which is my daughter, but that, yeah,
I was thinking, wow, she probably could have dealt with those.
Yeah,
thoughts
same
as well.
thoughts, but yeah, I mean, I definitely have thought about it. Never really acted on it, just because I still have one, you know. And I feel like with Zanai, that she is like my anchor. She like keeps me, you know, grounded and staying here and everything. But I have had those thoughts. I've been riding in a car and had thoughts of like driving into the guardrail or anything, stepping out into traffic. The day that Brianna died, that they came to take her out of the house, everybody was standing around, and I was walking towards the street, the main street, and I was like, man, I just want to die, like right then in that moment. And I was like, but I have Zanai, so I couldn't. And I had this lady, she was from a church, and she was following me, and she was like, what are you doing? And I was like, just didn't even respond. I just couldn't even. And then I was like, nothing. And I turned around and I walked back to the house because I still had Zanai, and I couldn't do that. She had just lost her sister. That would have destroyed her to lose me. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
That's
I definitely had those thoughts, you know. Yeah. It's like, you just don't want to live. You just don't. It's very hard to find purpose outside of probably existing children. Those that have lost children and didn't have other children, I don't understand what kept them outside of, I guess, God or whatever. Like, I don't understand how they could go on. Like, how they could. You know what I mean? What their strength, what could keep them here? Because for me, no, like there, you know, no reason.
I think that's was a powerful thing to share, so that people realize that if you're dealing with thoughts of suicidal thoughts, that does make you like you're weak or something like that, or like like something's wrong with you. It's a legitimate process or legitimate thought process. I mean, not legitimate, and you need to consider that, but I mean legitimate in terms of like it's a real thought. Like that's real things that other people go through and have been challenged with and have been able to move through. Now,
wait. And there is a national suicide hotline that you can call anonymously if you do need help. All you gotta do is Google it, and I'll probably put the number at the bottom of this.
Actually, that would be powerful.
At the bottom of this video, that you could call and reach out and talk to someone, because I've done it, which no one knew till now.
Okay.
I've called hotlines and stuff in the beginning because I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody, and the lady just listened to me, and I just like talked it out and everything. I called. I had to.
Okay.
And not even because at that moment that I was suicidal, but because I felt like I just needed someone that could hear me and wasn't trying to fix it all. Because family, friends, everybody wants you to just be better. So I needed to talk to someone outside of it. And that I wasn't, it was like the first week or two. So I wasn't like signed up with a therapist right away. So I needed to talk to someone. So I will definitely put the number at the bottom. So you can reach out.
And thank you for sharing that, because I think it's powerful for people to know that's real stuff. Like, it's okay to call people and get the help that you need with whatever you're dealing with, no matter what the thoughts are, no matter what stage you happen to be in of grief. If you need some help, to call and get the help that you need, because help is available. So glad you shared that, and we'll be sharing the number down below.
Yeah, I don't know what your other questions are yet, but I'm just going to say this because I hope I'm not overlapping.
It's fine.
Probably another question that you have, but I actually a few times had called my mom because I was in like such a depressed state. I told her like I felt like I needed to go to crisis. Like I felt like I needed to be put somewhere because I couldn't function. Like the feeling could be so heavy. It's like crushing. So you don't know really what to do. And it's like you just want the pain to stop. I prayed and prayed and prayed, and that was the thing that, like, I didn't go to crisis. She was like, I'm at work, I can't help you right now. So I just prayed and prayed and prayed. And I was like, God, please just, help me to keep my mind. Help me to still be able to stay sane. And in that moment, I was able to, so reach out to friends that you trust, family that you trust. Like I said, if there is no one, call Hotline, pray, do whatever you have to, to still be here. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we could go down the road just with down the faith road. Although that's got its own dynamic, but we'll have to save that for another, probably another video. Yeah. Did you ever have any? Did you deal with any levels of depression before Brianna passed?
Yes.
Okay. So I know this is unfair, but I'm assuming the degrees of depression. I guess there are degrees of depression. Levels. Yeah. Okay. So was it whatever depression you dealt with, and I'm not asking like what
before,
that was. Yeah.
Was
it worse? Like, did it feel like?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it sounds like this one's could be overwhelming.
Yeah, I never felt like I had to go to crisis. I mean, I dealt with depression plenty of times before, but I never felt like crisis ever. Like it was never that bad. I was always able, and it's so funny because I was always able to pull myself out of whatever was depressing me before. This type of depression is so ill-equipped. I had nothing in my toolbox to help me. And I think when you lose a child, there's I don't know. I mean, maybe some people got it. You know what I mean? Like, maybe some people have better tools than I'm sure they do. Have better tools than I do. But really, like, I don't. You're so lacking, like, with dealing with this. Because it's so not, like you said before with your dad passing away. It doesn't follow the, what do you call it? Like, it doesn't follow the
normal cycles of life.
There you go. Yeah. I'm like, finish my words. Yeah, it doesn't follow the normal cycles of life. It isn't. When your parent passes, it's more predictable. You know, at some point they're going to go before you. I mean, well, that's your thinking. This doesn't follow anything. Like, there's no rhyme, reason. It makes no sense at all. So.
Yeah, one video I was watching, I remember they said that's out of order, regardless how old the child is. Yeah. Like, there's no age in which a parent gets to where it's okay for their child to pass. Yeah. Before them. And like my grandmother kind of dealt with that because she lived to be 97, so she did bury one of her children, my other dad.
Right.
And so she had to deal with that type of cycle. So the cycle is just so out of order. As you were going through, well, I guess no, go ahead.
Oh, which is funny because I think when you have children, sometimes it's kind of like you reliving yourself again. I don't know if that makes sense, but what I'm saying is, like, okay, even with the holidays, right? At some point, as you're growing older, the holidays start to not mean as much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they lose their whatever,
mm-hmm.
you know? But when you have a child and they're excited about Christmas, they're excited about the holidays, you get excited because they're excited and you remember how that felt. It's like you get to see your child growing, but you're growing with them. You remember these stages. A part of you, I mean, it is your DNA. So it's like you get to relive again through your child. So when your child dies, a part of you really does die. I mean, yes, your DNA physically was that child, but also, like, I don't know, part of your spirit kind of go, like, something gets crushed in there in your spirit that's like, oh man, like a part of you that had all these hopes to do better through your child is like gone.
Now, not to, but you had mentioned a couple times about the tools. In case we talked about it during one of the videos, but share quickly your educational background, which kind of tied into.
Because it wasn't helpful. No, but I have a bachelor's in psychology, a minor in sociology. I have a master's in administration and human services. I've done a lot of work with the community, all different backgrounds, demographics, everything. So that's my background. But
so you have been exposed to the idea, yeah, kind of the, hey, here's the theory of what this is before you walk through it yourself. Yeah,
I mean, and I took death and dying classes, bereavement classes. Nothing like the experience gave me.
Do you think it helped at all? Just having a head knowledge?
Maybe it did. It did somewhat. It did, but it still, it helped me somewhat to understand what I was about to embark on a little bit, but not really. It's kind of like if I went to a travel agency and I read through a book of what Thailand looks like, which is on my bucket list, so that's why I named it. But hope to go there. But it's like reading about Thailand, but it's totally different to experience it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You know what I'm saying? So I could read about the mountains and how tall they are and about this and that. All the various flower, everything. I could read about it. I could look at pictures and see it. But to actually be there, look at the clouds, smell it, feel it, all the emotions that go with it, something totally different. Yeah, I had some knowledge of what I was going to be getting into. I have some knowledge maybe of what that mountain would be at whatever 1,000 feet high. But to stand at the bottom of the mountain and totally look up at it and see how massive it is, that's kind of what it is with the depression, with grief, with the whole thing. You know, it's like I could read about the mountain, but to be at the foot of that mountain and have to climb that mountain of depression, have to climb that mountain through the grief and actually be on a journey, something totally different.
I'm certain.
And I can't describe it to you. You know what I'm saying? And that's where it comes in. I can't really describe it to you about this mountain. You have to actually be going.
Yeah, because you describing it to me, it's like me now reading.
Right.
I'm not reading the brochure.
Right.
It's just in your words, but it's the brochure of it. But yeah, the emotion of it, the experiencing of it is completely different. Yeah.
Right.
That's powerful. So we kind of talked about how
what?
I guess how depression was manifesting in terms of not wanting to engage certain things.
Or even certain people. Mostly, you know.
Mostly people?
For me.
Okay.
I mean, some people really they hold on. I guess it depends on your personality. Some people hold on to people when they are grieving. They are surround themselves around people. For me, I isolated myself. I was kind of always a loner anyway. I mean, I have few friends, like core friends. I get along with basically everybody, but I have like core people, and even those people I felt like I couldn't relate to. So it's very like isolation, and I don't know. So this wasn't good.
So, oh yeah, as we're recording these videos, we have the holidays coming up. The first major one being next week, being Thanksgiving. How's depression, in particular, impacted your celebration of the holidays?
Not really wanting to celebrate. Feeling like I just want to lay in bed and let the day pass. I mean, the first one, like you said, being Thanksgiving. How thankful can you feel? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Initially, when it first happens, you're probably not into wanting to be so thankful. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Then on the flip side, though, there's this grief is like a coin, like it has double sides to it. So on the flip side, though, you begin to have an appreciation and be thankful for everything, because you know that life could be over so fast. So it's like, I don't know. But for me, I just didn't want to celebrate. Still not so much into celebrating. My mom just asked me, what am I going to be doing for Thanksgiving? And I said, probably staying home and having some Cornish hens. Instead of a big turkey, because it's just me and Sinai. So, Cornish hens and making some sides. And I was like, you're more than welcome to come over, but I'm probably not going to go anywhere. So I think it all depends on person. Some people want to get out. Some people don't want to be bothered. Whatever they want to do, let them do it. That's what I say. Yeah. Don't pressure grieving parents to like celebrate or be a part of these holidays. It's really a spotlight for the fact that your child is gone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What suggestions would you give to those suffering with depression? Like at what point, maybe this is two-part, but at what point should they seek outside assistance? Okay,
so I definitely say, if you can, friends and family, talk to them. Suicide hotlines available, therapists. There's also parent groups for parents that have suffered the loss of a child. There's grief groups, is what I meant to say. Grief support groups for parents that have lost a child. One of them is called Compassionate Friends, and they're nationwide, so you should get in contact with them. I'm sure you could Google or find some other support groups that might be helpful for you as well. At what point, I have no idea, because that would be up to you. It's an individual thing. There's no like, oh, well, if you are suicidal, then you should probably go talk to someone. But I don't think you want to wait for it to get to that point. I think you probably want to talk to somebody before that, but I don't know. Sorry, not really helpful. I don't know. Because it's an individual thing. Some people might be like, man, they're really, really depressed. They really need help. And then there might have been something they needed to kind of go through to stay in their bed for a week or two or whatever. Because they needed to maybe rest and process and whatever. Other times, them staying in their bed that long and they've never really experienced depression or going through that might be like, oh, he really needs help. Somebody needs to go in there it's an individual thing. It's so hard to tell, but I mean, I'm sure your therapist, if you start seeing one, will let you know. You know, I can't really give advice. I have a bachelor's. I don't have a license. I'm not qualified to make any kind of calls. So please don't use these videos as you know,
replacement for good advice.
Yeah.
Good,
any kind of
professional advice.
There you go.
Yeah.
Do not. That's my disclaimer. Because.
Okay. So how did you? Do you think it was easier for you to get that type of help because you've been able to seek that type of assistance before? Did that play a role, do you think? Or do you think you just were able to just identify within yourself, hey, maybe I should get some assistance? Okay.
I think both. I think because I've been exposed to it before, that I'm more willing to go see someone. I also think, though, too, that it was an individual thing. Because just because I've seen a therapist before doesn't mean that I was even agree with him or was gung-ho or thought that it was helpful. Because, I always didn't, you know. So, but I did know that, I mean, you know yourself. You know what I mean? So I knew that I was, like, on the brink of someplace that I needed assistance, that I could no longer, the tools I had just weren't working. So I was like, no, I really need, and because I still have a child, that I was like, I gotta get it together somewhat, at least hear an outside voice to maybe possibly help me, and that possibility was enough for me, you know. So
yeah, I think that's one of the things that you see with people, not specifically with this, but probably with this as well, where people again think of going for help as somehow meaning you're, you know, weak or not strong enough or something like that, instead of realizing no, it's just things that we go through in life that we just need some assistance to walk through. Doesn't mean that you're weak, you just need the assistance. I think we all need assistance with something in our lives. I mean, we're not, you know, here to just walk everything out by ourselves. So I think it's good to just realize it's okay to get help, get the help that you need as soon as you feel as though you need it.
And I think that it's important too to actually find the strength in asking for help, because people think it's weak to admit they need help, but really everybody can fake the funk or pretend that everything's okay. It actually takes someone that's strong enough to say, you know what, I need assistance and I can't do this on my own. To be vulnerable enough takes strength, you know. So.
Exactly. So what suggestions would you give to friends and loved ones of those going through holidays that have lost
a child? Not to pressure them. Just don't have all these high expectations for the holidays to still be the same for this person. If they don't want to partake in Pollyanna or saying what they're thankful for or any of that stuff, let them breathe. Don't put that pressure on them. They're remembering the traditions that no longer include their child. So they don't want to do that, or maybe they want to do that. You know, because there's going to be people that want to.
So put the offer out there, but don't expect.
Right, have that expectation. And if they decide they want to go to whatever it is, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Black Friday, fish fry, black eyed peas, whatever, any of those things, Hanukkah, I don't know, Kwanzaa, celebration, whatever. If they decide they want to go, and then they decide the same day or moment that it comes up that they don't want to go, please don't take it personal. Because it's really not about you. It's about where they're at, them grieving their child. They felt like they could do it. Now the time came, they can't do it. It's very emotional and it's difficult. You know, like I said, it's a spotlight on the fact that your child is missing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the empty chair at the table that no one really talks about,
Mm-hmm.
or everyone wants to talk about, and you just want to let the day go by. So
are there any things that they should maybe not say that you can think of?
I mean, there's so many.
I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, really, there's so many. I just say rule of thumb: put yourself in that person's shoes before you start talking. Try to think about, if I lost my child, would what I'm about to say be helpful? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, would it be helpful? That's the rule of thumb. There's so many things you can say that are offensive. Just think before you speak.
There's plenty to avoid, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Oh, you got a lot going on there. Okay.
This is let's go a couple more questions, but this is a statement, and this statement came from
Counselor Carl.
There you go, Counselor
Okay.
Carl. The depression of grieving is normal, natural, and not the same as clinical depression, and it eventually begins to resolve itself when we become so tired of hurting that we choose to find our way back to life, which involves a process of learning to let go.
Go back a second.
Okay.
You said something about learning. What? Say that.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
The depression of grieving is normal,
Uh-huh.
natural, and not the same as clinical depression,
Mm-hmm.
and it eventually begins to resolve itself when we become so tired of hurting that we choose to find our way back to life, which involves a process of learning to let go. Thoughts?
Let me read that. Because it's a lot there. So
Yeah,
it says when we
is.
choose to find our way back to life, which involves a process of letting go. It resolve itself when we become tired of hurting. That we choose to find. Yeah. I'm tired of hurting. I don't know. Yeah, I know. I'm just like, okay, it eventually begins to resolve itself when we become tired of hurting. That we choose to find our way back to life, which involves a process of learning to let go. I think we're always tired of hurting, right? So I know what he's trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
I know what he's trying to say. That we choose to find our way back to life. I mean, it is a choice. Ugh. It is a choice in some ways to keep with the perception that you have and a perspective that you have. You can choose to decide to look at things a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean you will be completely healed and everything will be butterflies and roses? No. Does that mean, though, that you can begin to come out of the anger and the depression because you choose to look at things in a different way and be, like we said, instead of angry and depressed where you feel like you can't go on, to now switching it and saying, you know what, I have a life and I can be grateful that there's still a purpose and a reason for me to be here, possibly to help others heal, whatever, possibly to heal myself, because maybe prior to, which is my experience, prior to Brianna dying, that I was so consumed with work, status, this, that, in order to provide for that child.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so into that I wasn't actually living and being aware of all the small things that now mean so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I think somewhere in here I can understand what he's saying. I don't like how he worded that eventually, okay, Oh, well, he says it eventually begins to resolve itself when we become tired of hurting, that we choose to, I don't know, I don't like that statement. We become tired of hurting, that we choose to find our way back, which involves a process of learning to let go. And let go of what? You know what I mean? I guess let go of maybe the bitterness, like I talked about, the bitterness, the deciding to be in that mindset. But
you think he's alluding to the next stage?
Yeah, he's probably going into acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that would be acceptance. He need to stick that somewhere like in between depression and acceptance, because just the words of choosing and tired of hurting. We're always like, we don't want to feel this way. We're tired of hurting from the beginning. Like, no, I know what he's saying though. Like, you get to a point where you're like, you know what? Either I'm going to be here and just wallow in this depression and bitterness and agony, or I'm going to choose to do something different and see what's on the other side of this. So I get it. I just don't like it.
Yeah. What struck me is I was thinking that part of it is maybe I don't know his particular situation. I don't know if he's going through that, what levels of grief, he has himself experienced. But it definitely sounds like a clinical representation, and not necessarily one from the perspective of someone from the inside of it. Even though he probably has
lost
someone, but maybe it's the degrees of or who he lost. Not to discount his loss or what he's experienced, but it just sounds like that. That's why I wanted to know what your thoughts were, because it stood out to me, even though I've never dealt with that particular type of grief. So I was wondering that's why I wanted to know your thoughts on it. Yeah.
I think he says though. Oh no, okay. No, he said not the same as clinical depression. But go ahead.
So, however, he goes on in that same statement. If we get stuck in hopelessness and guilt for a prolonged period of time, then the natural sadness of grief can turn into clinical depression and unresolved grief. So the question is, and I know this, I kind of know where your answer is going to be, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. How does one know when it's prolonged? And should the person go with their gut? Like, there's a lot of times where people talk about something being prolonged, or if it's going on for whatever, but because there's no clear delineation as to what too long is, how do you know when it's prolonged? Right.
So since it's more of a rhetorical question, because I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea what prolonged would be, because like you said, there's no time frame. I do think that certain red flags may come up, like we talked about. If it's leading into clinical depression, you just cannot even function to get up, get washed,
That's what I'm saying. Should the person go with their gut? Go with like, hey, I'm feeling like.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because even still, when I'm saying she passed away, I did not sleep, I did not eat, I was not getting washed until the day of the funeral. Like, so, and that's expected, but then at the same time, there was plenty of times throughout that whole first year where, and I don't know why I'm admitting this, but where I wasn't getting washed for a week, where I wasn't like able to eat, or there was like so many times throughout that first year where I was in that state, but I ended up coming out of it. You know what I mean? So I guess it is, and that was without seeing a therapist or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know.
So you didn't see a therapist in that first year?
I don't believe so. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. I can't remember.
Okay.
memory block.
Yeah.
So I don't remember. I know I've seen 4 therapists over the course of losing Brianna, but which we might have to do a video on. I know we're in the depression thing, but as far as just mental health in general, because I definitely have been diagnosed with PTSD, which is why I can't remember when I saw the therapist, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, and I have memory blocks, so I can't remember a lot that happened when I lost Brianna because of the amount of trauma. I also have anxiety, and I've been diagnosed with depression. So
the anxiety and depression were all and PTSD. Were they all diagnosed after Brianna passed?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the depression was before Brianna, but I never was diagnosed with anxiety and never PTSD.
Okay.
So, yep.
So
I'm just saying that goes hand in hand. That sometimes you'll have the depression, but then other things other mental health diagnosis can overlap in that arena too.
Yeah.
So.
What's interesting is I'm sure sometimes they unpack stuff that may have been there that the person didn't even recognize or ever get diagnosed.
Yeah, it definitely brings things to the surface when you lose your child. It brings a lot of mental health or other issues, even childhood issues and feelings of insecurity in your own parenting, before your child passed. Like, it brings everything to the surface, and that's what makes it hard too. That's what could send you into a greater depression as well, is that it brings everything to the surface. Like, I don't know.
So, again, back to the loved one, is there a way for them to help the grieving person to recognize when they're in a prolonged state? Because it seems like the challenge with the loved one is they're always wanting to say, hey, let me help you get better, let me help you get better, let me help you get better. But is there a way for them is there something for them to key in on? Like, and I did a video with someone on specifically mental illness, and we were talking about, is there something, are there things for them to key in on, or are there things for them to recognize to say, hey, maybe you should, to challenge that person, or maybe to help them recognize they've been still for a long time enough to go get some level of assistance? Or is that, because it seems to be, it's hard to articulate when long is too long, just naturally. So is there any way for someone from the outside to look and say, hey, you might need to, whatever?
I have no clue.
Okay.
I was saying, I don't know. I think that, I don't know. You would have to maybe Google, seriously, like, Google the answer for everything. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, but
get one of those little Google devices to tell you.
Yeah, no, seriously, like, you might want to see, like, what is clinical depression include, what does that look like?
Symptoms of that.
Yeah,
so maybe
and then start recognizing that within the person that you have around. Also, if they are talking about suicide or they just want to die and stuff, not to be so laxed about it. Like, don't just think that they're just saying that. Like, honestly, when, like, your child passes, like, you seriously just don't want to be here. It's very hard to find a purpose and a reason to be here, like, anymore. So when they say it, just take it serious. Don't just, like, shrug it off like, oh, they always talk like that, or they're just really down, but they'll be okay. Like, no, take it serious. Now, I'm not saying go commit like, get them committed, but at the same time, like, seriously,
let's go for a ride.
Right. Like, but you need to, like, have a real discussion with them. Like, ask them, like, have you attempted it? How are you feeling? Do you feel like you want to harm yourself today? Certain things to kind of really, like, gauge where they're at and figure out what your next move may be or should be, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Next question is, any final thoughts about depression? Anything about depression that we may not have touched on that you feel like needs to be brought to light?
Yeah, let a person kind of go through the feelings of being depressed and not always try to cheer them up. Like, you know, if they're depressed, let them be depressed. Let them, you know, like, I don't want to say just let them be depressed forever, but what I'm saying is it's a normal part of the process is depression,
mm-hmm.
you know, and so
just because they're depressed doesn't mean it's a bad part. It's just
right.
It's just
it's part of it. Yeah. And you know, a lot of my friends were like, you know, not a lot, but some mm-hmm. were like, oh, come on, let's just go out and you got to take your mind off of it. You have to, you know, there is no taking your mind off of it. I mean, you could try it. And like I said, even if you're like working to try to take your mind off it or whatever, when you have nothing to do, like when you're done work, your 9 to 5 is done at 5 and you have nothing to do, you're still left with those feelings. It's like you're never going to escape them. You have to actually press into the pain, go towards the core of the pain and like sit in it and try to process so you can reemerge and come out of it, mm-hmm. you know. But part of that is with the depression. It's like you have to kind of sit in that. Do you want to sit in it for so long that you can't get out? No. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there is a stage for that. Stage, whatever. There's a moment in time for that. So. Okay. Yep.
So you know where we are now?
Yep.
At the end, so there's
mm-hmm.
the 2 questions we always have at the end. So you want to share with the audience what the next stage is in the grieving process. The next video will be, what the next video will be on, as well as letting folks know how they can get in touch with you. Okay.
So the next stage is acceptance, which will be fun because I'm not there yet. And then, the other place you could reach me besides here is Life After Losing My Child is on Instagram. So catch me on Instagram and you'll see posts that should be able to help you. Feel free to comment or ask any questions here or Instagram, and I'll definitely be in communication with you. So thanks for joining us.
Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so that you can be notified of updates.
I just said ring a ding ding. All right, well, talk to you next time where we will be discussing acceptance. All right, bye.